Welcome to North Country Politics. This is episode 10. I'm Representative Mike Willett from Colebrook, and my co-host is Representative Arnie Davis from Dummer.
Myland.
I'm sorry, Myland. You do represent Dummer, though, don't you?
I am the Dummer rep, though.
Okay. We're going to have a couple of things to talk about today, and I'll let you start off with what...
Yeah, we had thank you, Mike. We had a pretty interesting, it was a short session, but we had a little bit of everything. We had some of the governor's vetoes we had to either sustain or override. We had some Senate bills that were amended, House bills that were amended in the Senate that we had to concur or non-concur with, and then we just had some other bills to pass or fail. But a couple that the governor had two bills that that we voted as she vetoed them. One was House Bill 451, establishing a paint product stewardship program. And I actually kind of like the bill, but it's an end produces, what do they call it? An end produces responsibility bill, which increases increases the price of the paint. And they consider that a tax. Live free or die here in New Hampshire. Nobody wants new taxes. Nobody wants more costs. So that actually, the veto was sustained. That bill's killed.
And I can understand that. It's taking a product, adding a dollar amount to it to help get rid of it, whatever you do. So if you've increased the price to help a government product, it's a tax.
That's right. That's right.
So I think that wasn't a good bill.
I'll tell you what, we will. My favorite part of the show. The second governor's veto was House Bill 349 relative to the practice of, correct me if I say this wrong, optometry and authorization to perform orthopedic laser procedures.
Well, Arnie, you've got the bill number right, but I don't want my optometrist doing orthopedic surgery on me.
Well, be that as it may, they won't be doing either
No,
because the veto was sustained.
yeah, and basically what it was is the ophthalmic, and it says that optometrists cannot do laser surgery because they're not medical doctors. And you put it quite nicely the other day, saying, if you need a knee replacement, you don't go see the nurse practitioner, even though she might have had some training.
That's right.
You go see an orthopedic, and it's the same thing.
Well, the eyes are a pretty important part of the body, and these, I just soon have somebody that does these every day, 5 days a week, and rather than have somebody that does one every other month, and
Specialists.
yeah. That one too. There we go. Another bill, Mike, that was important to me and I would say to you, House Bill 1205, prohibiting state and county-owned land from doing carbon projects. Now, this was amended in the Senate. Very, very minor amendment. They just added to it that it's state and county fee-based land, which means totally owned by the state or the county. If you own 100 acres and you have a state right-of-way going through it, the state does not have control over the carbon on that portion of the right-of-way. They have to own the land, which is, that's our bill, and that was the intent, to be fee-based land. So it came through and it passed in the House on Diane Powers spoke on it, and we concurred on a voice vote.
And what was the real thing I thought was important in that bill, and not that people have landowner rights, and if they want to do carbon, I have no problem doing carbon. But when it was money, public money was spent for public lands, whether it was state or county, and to go into a carbon project, to me it wasn't right, because that money was bought to buy that timberland for conventional uses.
Yeah.
Recreation, timber harvesting, and by putting into carbon, I've really thought it betrayed the public trust and their money when they bought that property.
Exactly, and as you know, the Timber Owners Association has been our biggest hurdle to get over with these carbon projects, but they were actually with us on this bill, and it's exactly like you said, the these lands were bought with taxpayer money for traditional timber purposes, and it was to keep timber jobs alive and to supply wood for the wood products industry. So this is the right way to go with this bill. Yep.
One thing I want to talk about is, this is tax week this week. We're coming on to April 15th, and I had to write my check to the IRS, so I've got taxes on my mind. And I saw this article today, and I thought it's pretty interesting. I'm going to kind of read it and go over some notes as I go, but it made sense, and it brought some stuff to light that I really didn't understand. And they talk about municipal and school spendings in the state of New Hampshire. And we all know that we talk about downshifting the cost of schools and towns to the towns away from the state. And we talk about it, but the numbers don't verify that. And I'll tell you why. And over the last 4 years, government spending in the state of New Hampshire, municipal government spending, has gone from $4.76 billion to $6 billion. Let me say it again. Over the last 4 years, municipal spending in the state of New Hampshire has gone from $4.6 billion to $6 billion. That's a 28% increase. And your local tax bill went up because your budget went up. Over the same period, over schools and stuff, New Hampshire schools have lost 40,000 students since its peak 2 decades ago, it dropping from 208,000 to 168,000 over the last 20 years. So we've lost 40,000 students, which is about 20%. And even with fewer kids, the school budgets continue to grow. And, and I look at this, I say, yeah, of course it continues to grow. We've got inflation and other things going on. And the people are saying, well, it's because of downshifting, that the state's not sending enough money, and it's forcing it on the locals. And it's the state's problem that our taxes are going up. We hear that every town we go to. And there's an argument, and why it doesn't make sense. And like I said, I'm going to read a little bit so we understand. Over the past 6 years, the state has funded more, to towns and schools more money than ever before. The state increased the total education aid from $599 million to $950 million over the last 6 years. Again, $600 million to $950 million, over a 50% increase, a 52% increase over the last 6 years of school funding. And now that makes it over $2.1 billion in state education funding for this year. So the state has given the schools in the state of New Hampshire $2.1 billion for school aid. And if you break it down over this last 2-year budget, it's taken the per student average from $5,900 per student to $7,100 per student. And the Republicans also, they pushed another $200 million into the taxes to the towns for the schools through the statewide tax, property tax, and from the rooms and meals tax. All the towns got a lot more money. I know in Colebrook, the rooms and meals tax went up $75,000 in Colebrook alone. So that money has been shifted down from the state to the local economies. So the total support from the state for our schools has grown 74%. And the key to this is, in that time, over the last 6 years, inflation is 29%. So we've increased it by 74% with an inflation rate of 29%. And the state sent more money, but property taxes still went up 20%. If it was real downshifting, then that would be impossible, because you're getting more money, making up for the inflation.
Yeah.
Your budget should be going down. And the biggest problem that they see is that in our local elections and our local budget processes, that less than 20% of the voters show up to decide these budgets and how their money is being spent. But when we have a national election for our president or our national politics, over 70% of the people show up for these elections and these events. So the spending decisions that hit your wallet the hardest are being made by the smallest amount of people at the meetings that most taxpayers don't even know that's happening.
That's right, yeah.
So there's a bill coming up in the next week. It's called House Bill 1300, and it's called the Property Tax Protection Act. So what it is, it would allow your school budget to grow no more than the inflation rate per year, and unless it is overridden by a majority of the town at the town meeting. It doesn't include construction or capital improvements. It's just on budgeted things themselves. Bond projects are excluded. You would decide whether the school budgets can grow beyond the prior year's level adjusted for inflation, and no more budget increases decided by a handful of insiders on a Tuesday night at an empty auditorium.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest benefit of this is going to be that it's going to make more people get engaged. If this tax cap or budget cap is enforced and you're so unhappy about it, you know what? You're going to scream and you're going to show up. And if you show up and vote against it, God bless you. But you're at least doing your job and showing up. And that's where the problem is right now, where we only have 20% of our people showing up, making a decision for the other 80%.
Mike, you know, you're exactly right, because in the town of Milan, where I'm from, we have the town meeting the first night, and the second night we have the school meeting. And everybody shows up for the town meeting. Now, our tax rate in Milan is about 14%. The county and the town tax is 4% of it. The school is 10% of it. Everybody shows up for the small town portion, which isn't much. But the next night is just the people involved in the school systems, primarily. There's a few that go, but very few people make the decisions for everybody.
And we see the same thing in Colebrook. Our school budget is $7.5 million. Our town budget's about $3 million. And at the school meeting, there was 80 people and maybe 125 at the town meeting. And I think part of it is because the school budgets are very complicated and they're hard to understand. And I blame some of it on school administration because they can be a little condescending because you don't understand the budget or you ask questions that they think is simple. And I know a lot of people don't like to ask because they feel like they're going to be, minimalized and not treated right. But I think that we all have to get engaged. And like I said, the state aid to the schools has increased significantly. And, when I hear downshifting from here on out, I'm going to say, look at your numbers, because it's not the case. It's not downshifting.
Now, is this bill coming off the table? Has it been tabled? I don't remember because I think we saw this earlier this year.
Yeah, I think, I tell you, I'm not sure why it's coming back or how it's coming back, but it's coming back. And I think that, to look, like I said, over the last 6 years where we've increased 50% in school funding to the schools, going from 5,900 to 7,100 per student. I mean, that's a lot of money.
The numbers don't lie.
They don't lie. So this is, even with inflation, it's way above inflation. So
yeah.
As state representatives, I go to so many of these meetings and say, well, the state reps aren't doing their job. State reps, we're doing our job. It's time that locally that we have to do our jobs also.
That's
and
right.
I'm not putting this on, I know in our town, we look at every budget line item and I know in our town, if we had a 3% cap, that's no problem.
Yeah.
We haven't had a 3% increase in a budget overall, and I bet you over 10 years. In the schools, I know they've got mandates and they've got to work through it, but we all have to tighten our belt somehow, and we've all got to work together to figure this out.
Yep. So, I have a couple of bills that were removed from consent. One of them, it was Senate Bill 649, increasing fines for handheld mobile electronic devices while driving a motor vehicle. And what that primarily did was double the fines. And because they tried to table it. No, they didn't try to table it. This one, they just tried to kill the bill, but it passed on a voice vote.
And that's, when we heard the testimony, it was very interesting. At first I was against this bill. because it was a $250 fine for first offense, 500 for a second, and I think 1,000 for third, and a license loss. But when they talked about it on the floor, they really talked about it. It's really focusing at some of the younger generation because
Yeah.
they're the ones that are the biggest culprits.
Trying to discourage, yeah.
And then, for me, a $250 fine, it's a lot of money. But these kids at a $250 fine with $1,200 phones is probably not as meaningful to them as it is to me.
Well, I think it might be. Their first offense would be a $500 fine now.
Now it would be, that's right.
And a third offense is loss of license for some time. So,
Yep.
so I think that'll help.
It'll save lives.
The second one was Senate Bill 649, increasing fines. No, it was, sorry. Where am I here? I don't have the Senate number on this one. It's refusal, it was removed from consent, relative to refusal of consent on testing to determine alcohol concentration in penalties for aggravated driving while intoxicated. So I had a hard time believing, but it's true. 75% of the people that are stopped for drinking and driving were refused to test. And this is mostly aimed at repeat offenders.
Yeah, it's the old, what we used to call the old implied consent law. And so if you stop for DWI and you don't take the test, the sobriety test, you lose your license automatically for 6 months.
Yeah.
And come to find out, like you said, the repeat offenders, it was less of a penalty to take it for another 6 months than it was to maybe lose your license for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, yeah.
And the governor wanted to change it from 6 months to a year, and that would put it in line with many other states. But an amendment came through to change it to 9 months.
That's right.
And that passed. And the governor wasn't thrilled, but she was happy, and she's going to sign it.
Yep. Now, this went through a roll call vote, 259 to 94, which tells me, that's overwhelming in the way our House is made up. So that was totally bipartisan, and everybody's in support of the governor.
I think everybody that had a license voted for it, and everybody that didn't voted against it.
Yeah, maybe. Another thing I found interesting was at the end of session, we always have what's called unanimous consent. And that's where different, you sign up for that, and different members can go up and talk about something important to them or to their family or their heritage or whatever. But I found there was two separate agendas from across the aisle, and they got up, and all they were really doing was kind of backdoor, get up, and they hold you hostage, you have to stay and listen, and they were bashing our party, and so there was two objections. They both had, we voted to see if they were going to continue, and rightfully so, they were both stopped from speaking, and that's the kind of thing that drives our parties apart. It's hard enough to get stuff done working across the aisle. We all have differences in opinions, but there's certain things we can work together, and we need to stop this foolishness of just trying to kind of backdoor each other and put each other down.
The second one was extremely foolish, and it was cut off very quickly. The guy gets up there and says, on April 15th when we started bombing in Iran, he said, I was worried it was going to be worse day than September 11th. Yeah. And what a shame to minimize our volunteers, our firemen, our policemen that lost their lives on September 11th.
Yeah.
I'm sure that the bombing is very important, but to equate it to the loss of 3,500 lives in our own country, it was just trying to incite hatred.
Yeah. And one other thing I'd like to bring people up to speed on is everybody in COAS knows there's a problem with communications for first responses, for the law enforcement, for fire up in Pittsburgh and the surrounding areas. So leadership, the Republican leadership has been working with us, Jason Osborne, Ross Berry, Zach Letourneau, and there's a few others, to see if we can get some money to fix this problem up there. So we met with Mark Doyle last Friday at the State
Department of Safety.
Department of Safety, yes. And him and his team were very helpful. I guess what we were looking for is a plan. Like if this money does come in, how we spend it. And it's probably somewhere around a $2.2 million project, believe it or not. And what we're trying to do is raise the wattage on the towers, maybe get some new repeaters, new radios. And I saw the line items. I was very surprised how expensive that stuff is, but it saves lives.
There's so many dead spots in Pittsburgh, and we talk about Pittsburgh, Errol, that whole North Country area, and for emergency services, there's people and ambulances and police and Fish and Game officers that can't communicate because the radios just don't work. The towers aren't strong enough, and there's an issue with the FCC because we can't send our signals as strong as we can because they go into Canada and the Canadians don't want it. So this is a big project, but it seems like everybody's on the right path.
Yeah. I think everybody's realizes the problem and is trying to correct it. Also, there was a dispatcher, Becky.
Yep.
Is it Becky Robinson?
Becky Robinson, yes.
Very helpful with this. And I don't know his last name, but Chris is an ambulance driver for the 45th. Mm-hmm. And so they made the trip down and were very, very helpful.
Becky runs the whole what do they call it? The whole dispatch center, Northern Borders Dispatch, which covers, from, I think, Columbia, North, Errol, Norton, Vermont, Canaan, Vermont, all the way in plus 3 towns in Quebec.
Well, that's what I was surprised about, and that's where it gets tricky when you're getting funding, because we do have some places in Quebec and some places in Vermont that we overlap with, and it gets a little tricky. You got to get creative with your grant writing.
Yes. One other thing that happened this week, and be quick on this, we saw, if you have been watching the State House News, Senator Timothy McGough from Merrimack has basically been, censored. He's been thrown out of the Republican caucus with some pretty significant allegations. And we saw the same thing today, this week on the Democrat side. Representative Ellen Reed, for her behavior, was asked to leave the State House and committee hearings. And I'm glad to see that the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate are taking some of these misbehaviors seriously and holding people to the fire for their actions. There's a certain decorum that needs to be there. It has been there, this tradition, and we need to hold it up.
I totally agree with that. Now, to be honest with you, Mike, I like a good rumor or story just like everybody else, but I don't know enough about each of them to say, but they're both pretty overwhelmingly in the hot seat right now. But I agree. There needs to be a certain amount of decorum, and it's lacking. We go to session, and I don't have my jacket on tonight, and Nicholas Bridle, how's our wardrobe? He's in my committee, as you know, and I was talking with him at the last committee meeting, and he pulls out his computer and he said, "I got to show you something." He had all today's episode 10. He had last 9 episodes, and he started going through each one. And I didn't wear the same clothes every time, I promise, but they look similar. It looked enough where I had a brown vest on and a khaki shirt. One time I had a pink shirt like you, and so I decided to change it up a little bit. Gives our editor a little break on his eyes too, I guess.
I just have a hard time wearing my Hawaiian flowered shirt when it's 10 below zero. It's nice to see, because we see people in the State House. They wear a sport coat with a T-shirt and a pair of jeans, and that's really not the decorum that's supposed to go on in there. No, and it's frustrating. It's a lack of respect for our history and the people who have preceded us. And if someone has a financially hard time, I have no problem. But it's not. It's just, a lot of them will wear T-shirts with inflammatory logos on them.
Like a concert T-shirt. or
Yeah,
something.
I'm saying, have some pride.
Yeah. Well, it's nice to see decorum coming back to the
Yep.
State House. So yeah.
But I think that kind of wraps it up for this week.
Yep.
I thank you, everybody, for watching. Please feel free to contact us with any questions or concerns or anything you'd like us to talk about. But if not, we'll see you next week.
Yes. Thank you.